Today, we're going to take a deep dive into the life and crimes of Ted Bundy. We've got some excerpts from what seemed like a pretty straightforward biography. But, the more we kind of dug into this material, the more we realized that even with someone as infamous as Ted Bundy, there's always something new to uncover.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating is that Bundy's own accounts of his life are just full of these contradictions. And it makes it really tough to separate fact from fiction. It's like trying to put together a puzzle, but the pieces keep changing shape.
Yeah, exactly. And take his early life, for instance. He was born Theodore Robert Cowell, right?
Yeah.
Raised by his grandparents under this kind of fabricated family structure. I mean, that's a pretty complex start right there.
Absolutely. And at first, Bundy talked about having these kind of warm, fuzzy memories of his grandparents. But then later on, he paints this much darker picture. He claims his grandfather was this tyrannical, abusive figure, and that his grandmother was mentally unstable. But here's the thing. Newer evidence actually challenges those darker accounts.
So wait, are you saying that he was he intentionally, kind of twisting the truth to maybe fit this narrative of a troubled childhood? Or was this just another example of his manipulative tendencies, even when it came to, his own personal history?
It really makes you question his motives, doesn't it?
For sure.
I mean, was he just a master manipulator from the very beginning?
Yeah, I mean, and then there's his childhood behavior. And we're not just talking, typical kid stuff here. There were reports of him placing knives around a sleeping ant, potential animal cruelty, even building what he called tiger traps to hurt other children.
Now, this is where things start to get really interesting. Because these behaviors, as disturbing as they are, they could offer some early clues into Bundy's later development. I mean, there's a lot of research out there that shows a strong correlation between cruelty to animals in childhood and a predisposition to violence against humans, later in life.
Okay, so that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But then you consider his social life. And it just gets even more complicated. Bundy claimed he was isolated, unable to form these genuine bonds, but his classmates actually described him as popular and well-liked.
Right. This duality, it's a hallmark of Bundy's personality. He was so good at creating these different personas for different audiences. It almost makes you wonder, was there ever a real Ted Bundy? Or was he just a collection of carefully crafted masks?
Right. It's like he was almost rehearsing for this role of a lifetime, playing the part of the charming all-American guy, while secretly harboring these incredibly dark impulses. And speaking of roles, his university years seemed to mark a pretty significant shift. He was ambitious, driven. He even had political aspirations. He fell in love with Diane Edwards.
But then that breakup with Edwards in 1968, it's often seen as a potential turning point for Bundy. It's like something just snapped inside him.
And then, just a year later, he meets Elizabeth Klopfer, who becomes his long-term girlfriend, father figure to her daughter. On the surface, he's building a seemingly normal, even successful life. Excels academically, works at a suicide hotline, gets accepted into law school, but behind this carefully constructed facade.
Well, remember, this is also the same time that Bundy met Anne Rule, his future biographer, while they were both working at that suicide hotline. And even she, she saw no hint of the monster lurking beneath the surface.
Wow. So the woman who would eventually write one of those comprehensive accounts of his crimes was completely fooled by his charm and charisma.
Completely fooled.
It's kind of terrifying to think about how effective that was,
Oh, absolutely.
And then, in 1973, things take another turn. He cuts off Diane Edwards again, starts skipping law school. And it's right around this time that young women start disappearing in the Pacific Northwest.
So, I mean, are we saying that the timing of these events is just a coincidence? Or could this be the moment when Bundy's carefully constructed facade just starts to crumble and his dark impulses take over?
It's impossible to know for sure, but the correlation is definitely chilling. And, even Bundy himself was pretty vague about when his spree actually began. He offered all these conflicting accounts, refused to give any specific details about those early crimes. It's almost like he wanted to keep that part of his life shrouded in mystery. Yeah, it's like he was still trying to control the narrative even then, choosing which parts of the story to reveal and which ones to keep hidden. So let's talk about those Pacific Northwest murders. This is where the Ted persona, the one we've all heard about, really takes shape, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is where he really perfects his modus operandi. Witnesses described him as this charming young man, often with a cast or a sling, driving a tan Volkswagen Beetle,
Yeah.
and always asking for help. He used this kind of feigned vulnerability to disarm his victims. He played the role of someone in need to gain their trust.
It's it's terrifying to think about um, how effective that was. He was really preying on our natural instinct to help others, turning our empathy against us.
Absolutely.
And it worked. The disappearances start to pile up. Fear grips the region. The first documented homicide, Karen Sparks in 1974, it was particularly brutal.
It really
A
was.
vicious attack, sexual assault with a metal rod. She survived but was left with permanent brain damage.
A truly horrific crime.
Yeah, it's a chilling reminder of the violence that was lurking beneath Bundy's charming exterior. And as the investigation unfolds, you see this strange paradox emerge. Bundy, the prime suspect in these string of brutal murders, is actually working at a crime prevention agency and even writing a pamphlet on rape
You
prevention.
can't make this stuff up.
I know, it's crazy.
It really speaks volumes about his ability to compartmentalize, to disassociate his actions from this carefully constructed public persona. He was living a double life, and he was incredibly good at keeping those two worlds separate.
But what about Elizabeth Klopfer, his girlfriend? She had her suspicions, right? She even reported him to the police multiple times.
Klopfer's suspicions were definitely growing, especially as more details emerged, things that align with Bundy's behavior and possessions. But without hard evidence, the police were hesitant to focus on this seemingly upstanding law student. And Bundy, as we know, was meticulous in covering his tracks.
So you have this community that's terrorized by a serial killer, a girlfriend who suspects her partner, and a police force that's struggling to connect the dots. It's almost unbelievable how long he managed to evade capture.
It really is. Bundy was a master manipulator, a chameleon who could blend in seamlessly. He understood the power of perception, and he used it to his advantage.
But as his crimes escalate, the net begins to close in. And that brings us to his move to Salt Lake City for law school in 1974. Does this mark a shift in his hunting grounds as well?
It does. His activities expand to Utah, Idaho, and Colorado. The murders continue, often leaving bodies in mountainous areas. He even attempts to kidnap Carol DeRanche, posing as Officer Roseland.
Yeah, and thankfully DeRanche managed to escape, and her testimony would later prove to be crucial in bringing Bundy to justice. But even with this near miss and Klopfer's continued reports, Bundy remains elusive.
It was a frustrating period for investigators. They suspected Bundy was their man, but they needed irrefutable proof. And meanwhile, Bundy continues to live his double life. Law student, charming boyfriend, all while secretly terrorizing multiple states.
Last time, we left off with Bundy continuing his reign of terror, even as the authorities were closing in.
Right, and it's August of 1975 when he's finally apprehended. But not for murder, actually. He's arrested in Utah for aggravated kidnapping and attempted criminal assault. This is the Carol DeRanche case we were talking about earlier.
Right, right. And I remember you mentioned that the police found some suspicious items in his car.
Oh, absolutely. They find a ski mask, rope, handcuffs, a crowbar. These discoveries are like flashing red lights, linking him to a string of unsolved crimes. But at this point, they still lack the concrete evidence needed to pin the murders on him.
So it's a waiting game for the authorities.
Exactly. A race against time as investigators tried to meticulously piece together this puzzle, hoping to build a solid case against Bundy. But then, in a twist that shocked the nation, Bundy escapes custody. Not once, but twice.
Wait, twice? How is that even possible? I mean, this is Ted Bundy we're talking about, one of the most notorious criminals in the country at this point.
I know, his escapes are almost as legendary as his crimes. The first time, during a court appearance in June of '77, he jumps out of a courthouse window. He'd lost weight and was somehow able to squeeze through this tiny gap, like something out of a movie. And then in December of that same year, he manages to create a hole in the ceiling of his jail cell and disappears into the night.
It's almost unbelievable. You'd think they would have had him under maximum security by then, knowing his history and the severity of his crimes.
You would think so, but Bundy was cunning, resourceful. He exploited weaknesses in the system, played on the complacency of those around him, and used his charisma to manipulate situations to his advantage.
So after these two daring escapes, where does he end up?
Well, Bundy eventually makes his way to Florida, seemingly attempting to lay low, blend in. But as we've seen throughout his story, Bundy simply can't escape his true nature.
It's like that old saying, wherever you go, there you are.
Exactly. And unfortunately for the unsuspecting residents of Tallahassee, Florida, Bundy's darkness reemerges with a vengeance. In January of 1978, he carries out this brutal attack at a sorority house, leaving 2 young women dead and 2 others severely injured.
This attack at the Chi Omega sorority house was particularly horrific, even by Bundy standards. The level of violence was just shocking, and it really sent shockwaves through the nation. It felt like he was no longer trying to just kill his victims,
Yeah.
but to inflict as much pain and suffering as possible.
It was a chilling escalation of his brutality. And then just a month later, he kidnaps and murders 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, further cementing his place as one of the most dangerous criminals in American history.
It's heartbreaking to think about
No.
what those young women and Kimberly Leach went through. It's a stark reminder of the real world consequences of Bundy's actions, the devastating impact he had on countless lives.
Absolutely.
And thankfully, these crimes would ultimately lead to his capture. Bundy is apprehended in February of '78 while driving a stolen car. Finally, the reign of terror comes to an end. You'd think this would be the end of the story, but with Bundy, there are always more twists and turns. His trials become a media sensation, broadcast across the nation. And you've got to tell me about his decision to represent himself.
Oh, yeah. Here we see Bundy's arrogance and narcissism on full display. He saw the courtroom as a stage, and himself as the star performer. He relished the spotlight, often playing to the cameras and attempting to control the narrative. He genuinely believed that he was smarter than everyone in the room, that he could outwit the prosecution with his legal knowledge and charm.
I guess that law school experience finally came in handy,
Mm-hmm.
but certainly not in the way he initially envisioned.
Right.
So his courtroom antics and attempts to manipulate the legal system ultimately failed.
They did. The evidence against him was just overwhelming. Witness testimony, physical evidence, and most damning of all, the bite marks on Lisa Levy's body, which forensic experts matched to castings of Bundy's teeth.
That must have been a pretty significant breakthrough in forensic science at the time.
It was. Bite mark analysis was still a relatively new technique. But in Bundy's case, it provided this crucial piece of physical evidence that directly linked him to the crime scene. And despite his attempts to deny and deflect, the jury saw through his charade.
So even with all the mounting evidence against him, Bundy continued to maintain his innocence. And wasn't there something about a plea deal he refused?
Yes. During the Chi Omega trial, Bundy was offered a plea deal, plead guilty to 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. And in exchange, he would receive 2 25-year sentences and 2 75-year sentences. This would have spared him the death penalty. But Bundy, convinced of his own brilliance and unable to admit guilt publicly, flat out rejected the offer.
Wow. It's amazing how pride can drive even the most rational individuals to make decisions that are clearly not in their best interest.
It really is. It speaks volumes about Bundy's personality. He couldn't bear the thought of being seen as a monster, even if it meant a lighter sentence. He clung to this carefully crafted image of himself as this charming, intelligent, and innocent man, even in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary.
And then, of course, there's the Kimberly Leach trial.
Right. This trial, held in 1980, sealed Bundy's fate. The evidence was even more damning. And the jury wasted no time in delivering a guilty verdict, resulting in a 3rd death sentence.
It's hard to imagine what must have been going through his mind at that point. Did he finally realize the gravity of his situation, or was he still clinging to this belief that he could somehow escape justice?
It's difficult to say for sure, but one thing that did come out during this trial was another bizarre twist in the Bundy saga: his marriage to Carol Ann Boone.
Right. This was during the penalty phase of the trial, wasn't it?
It was. He exploited this obscure Florida law that allowed couples to declare themselves married in court if certain conditions were met. So right there in front of the judge and jury, Bundy proposes to Boone, who had been a devoted supporter throughout the trials, and she accepts.
It's a scene that's both surreal and strangely touching. Did they actually love each other, or was this just another one of Bundy's manipulative tactics?
Bundy's motives, as always, are shrouded in mystery. Some believe it was a ploy for sympathy from the jury, while others argue that Boone was genuinely smitten with him, blinded by his charm and charisma. Whatever the truth, the courtroom marriage just added another layer of complexity to Bundy's already convoluted story.
And Boone remained devoted to him for years, even giving birth to his daughter while he was on death row.
It's a testament to his persuasive abilities. Even from behind bars, he maintained this extensive network of female admirers, many of whom believed he was innocent or somehow misunderstood.
It's unsettling to think about how he was able to maintain this hold over women, even after being convicted of such horrific crimes.
It goes back to that duality of his personality, the mask of normalcy he wore so well. He could be charming, intelligent, even vulnerable at times. He preyed on empathy, on the desire to see the good in people, even when the evidence pointed to the contrary.
So even as he sits on death row, Bundy is still manipulating, still controlling the narrative, still holding sway over this devoted following. But eventually the facade starts to crumble, doesn't it? He finally begins to confess to his crimes.
He does. After years of denials and carefully crafted lies, Bundy begins to open up, offering these chilling details of his crimes. But even in confession, he can't resist playing games.
What do you mean?
Well, at first he speaks in the third person, almost as if he's telling someone else's story, a way to kind of distance himself from the horror he inflicted. And then as his execution date draws near, he starts to offer more direct confessions, often in graphic detail, but always with this air of calculation.
So he was still trying to manipulate, even as he was facing the ultimate consequence.
It seems so. Some believe he was hoping to gain notoriety, to ensure that his infamy would live on even after his death. Others speculate that he saw confession as a way to gain some measure of control over the situation, a way to have the last word. He even offered information on unsolved cases, hinting that he knew more than he was letting on.
Was he being truthful?
Uh-huh.
Or was this just another one of his games?
It's hard to say for sure. He did provide some details that helped investigators close a few cold cases, but he also held back information, almost as if he was savoring his secrets, using them as leverage.
It's
a
chilling thought.
Yeah.
He was playing God, even from death row, controlling the flow of information, choosing what to reveal and what to keep hidden.
Exactly.
And as his execution date approached, he even offered to help investigators with the Green River Killer case, claiming he could provide insights into the mind of a serial killer. Did he actually offer any valuable information, or was he just trying to buy himself more time?
It's widely believed that he was primarily interested in delaying his execution. While he did provide some psychological profiles, they were ultimately deemed to be of little value to the investigation. Bundy, even in his final days, seemed more concerned with manipulating those around him than offering genuine assistance.
So he was still trying to play the system, even as the clock was ticking down.
That's the tragedy of Ted Bundy. He was brilliant, charismatic, but ultimately he was consumed by his own darkness, by his need for control, by his inability to take responsibility for his actions. He was a master manipulator to the very end, leaving a legacy of pain, fear, and unanswered questions.
We're back, and I gotta say, diving into the dark depths of Ted Bundy's psyche, it's a truly unsettling experience. Even after his capture, the trials, those shocking confessions, there's still so much we don't know, so much that remains shrouded in mystery.
Yeah, and what's particularly unsettling, I think, is that Bundy's story, it didn't really end with his execution. His case continues to generate all this debate and analysis. It forces us to confront these uncomfortable truths about human nature and the limits of our understanding.
Yeah, you're right. There's this lingering sense that we've only scratched the surface, like we're still trying to piece together a puzzle, but with half the pieces missing.
Exactly, and I think one of the biggest missing pieces is the true extent of his crimes. I mean, Bundy confessed to 30 murders, but a lot of experts believe that number is a gross underestimate. He even hinted at a far higher body count himself,
right,
making these cryptic statements that suggested he was responsible for dozens, maybe even hundreds of deaths.
God, it's a horrifying thought, isn't it? To think that there are potentially countless victims out there, their families still searching for answers, their stories forever intertwined with Bundy's reign of terror.
It really speaks to the the profound ripple effect of his actions. The
Yeah.
way his crimes continue to cast this long shadow. Even decades after his death, there are still families out there who don't know what happened to their loved ones, who are denied even the closure of a proper burial.
That just adds another layer of tragedy to an already horrific story. But let's maybe shift gears for a moment and talk about the psychology of Ted Bundy. We've talked about his manipulative tendencies, his lack of remorse.
Yeah.
But what was it that drove him to commit these horrific acts? What turned him into the monster we know him to be?
Yeah, there's no easy answer to that question. No single explanation that can fully encompass the complexity of Bundy's psyche. Experts have offered various diagnoses over the years: antisocial personality disorder, psychopathy, narcissistic personality disorder. The list goes on and on. He displayed this chilling combination of traits: a profound lack of empathy, a fascination with violence and control, this seemingly insatiable need to dominate and possess his victims.
We've talked a lot about Bundy's charm and charisma, his ability to blend in and manipulate those around him. But when you read about his crimes, it's clear that there was this deep-seated rage and sadism at play as well.
No, absolutely. Bundy described the act of murder as the ultimate possession, a way to completely control and dominate his victims. He even admitted to engaging in necrophilia, revisiting crime scenes to spend time with the bodies of those he had killed. It's a level of depravity that's just hard to fathom.
Oh, it's almost as if he was trying to erase their individuality, their humanity, and replace it with his own twisted vision of ownership, and yet he managed to maintain this facade of normalcy for so long. He was politically active, worked at a suicide hotline, even dated seemingly normal women. It's mind-boggling how he was able to reconcile these two sides of himself.
Oh, no, it really is. It speaks to his remarkable ability to compartmentalize, to create these distinct personas for different audiences. He could be the charming law student one minute and the cold-blooded killer the next, and he seemed to effortlessly shift between these roles as needed. Some experts believe that he may have even experienced a form of dissociation,
Right.
allowing him to kind of detach from the emotional consequences of his actions.
So he was living a double life. One foot in the world of normalcy, the other in this realm of unspeakable darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And he was incredibly skilled at keeping those worlds separate.
Exactly. He chose victims he didn't know, meticulously planned his attacks, and took steps to avoid leaving evidence behind. He was aware of how police investigations work, and he used that knowledge to stay one step ahead for years. But in the end, it was his own arrogance and his insatiable need for control that led to his downfall.
You're right. He couldn't resist representing himself in court, playing to the cameras, reveling in the spotlight. He thought he could outsmart the system, but he underestimated the power of evidence, of witness testimony, of the collective determination to bring him to justice.
And even after his conviction, he continued to manipulate and control, offering confessions and information in exchange for delays, always with the hope of somehow escaping his fate. But ultimately, the game was up.
So here we are, decades after his execution, still grappling with the legacy of Ted Bundy. What can we learn from him, from his crimes, from our own enduring fascination with this enigmatic figure?
I think Bundy's case serves as this stark reminder that evil can wear many masks, that appearances can be deceiving. It highlights the importance of vigilance, of trusting our instincts, of speaking up when something seems wrong.
It also forces us to confront the limitations of our justice system, the ways in which a cunning and manipulative individual can exploit loopholes and manipulate the media to their advantage. We've learned a lot since Bundy's time, thanks in part to advancements in forensic science, and a greater awareness of the dangers posed by serial predators.
But the shadow of Bundy lingers. His crimes continue to fascinate and horrify, a testament to the enduring power of evil. And perhaps that's the most important lesson of all. We must remain vigilant, not only against the obvious threats, but also against the more insidious dangers that lurk beneath the surface, the darkness that can reside within a seemingly ordinary individual.
On that sobering note, we come to the end of our deep dive into the life and crimes of Ted Bundy. It's a story that continues to haunt and intrigue, a chilling reminder of the complexities of human nature. and the enduring power of evil. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Till next time, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep diving deep.